Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike O'Brien. I'm here today with Gary Ludwig, one of the true icons in our business and fire service. I think some of us, as what I would dub the nation paramedics, grew up listening or reading Gary's articles throughout the fire service. Paramedic I just knew it was something I consumed on a very regular basis. Here very recently, I had the absolute alongside Gary as he served as the president with the International Association of Fire Chiefs. And if any of you don't know what this is like the nation North American fire chief. And there's so much work that needs to be done, but Gary had to really show what he's made of when COVID hit. We were all sitting in a boardroom, and it was an absolute pivot. We were working on his campaign. If you don't feel well, stay home, or don't stay home. Don't feel well, get some help. And I just had the absolute honor to see how hard of a worker this man is, not only for the fire service professionally and moving the meter, but high integrity, true family man. And I'm so excited to talk to you, Gary, and out a little bit more about you. Good morning.
Cool, Mike. Well, good morning. And what an honor it is to be with you, man, because I have such high esteem for you also. And I've had an opportunity, as you know, to work with you. And you are one that does not believe in just sitting back in a chair. You continually roll up your sleeves and you just work feverishly, which I'm so impressed with, because I don't appreciate slugs, and you're not a slug, believe me. So thank you. What an honor to be on here with you this morning.
Well, thanks. All right, so let's go back in time, right? Where did you grow up as a kid?
So I grew up in South St. Louis. South St. Louis was a home place for me. I grew up on the near south side. I could go to the third floor of our home, which was like any other home where it was in my area, where they were 3-story bricks, where you had 2 family flats, where you had a family on the first floor and a family on the second floor, and there was an attic on the third floor. And our home was, my grandma lived on the second floor, and we lived on the first floor. And I could go to our third floor attic and look out the window, and I could see downtown St. Louis. I could see the lights of the stadium at night. We were about a mile west of the big Anheuser-Busch brewery, and if the winds were blowing the right way, you could get the smell of the hops and all the barley cooking and making the beer. And so it were neatly lined streets with a separation of about 36 inches between each home. And so that was where I grew up at. And it was family, neighbors, church, and in a working class group of people that believed in hard work.
So public school or private?
I went to Catholic school. My parents were deeply religious, and so they believed in a Catholic education. And so all my formative years, I went 1 through 8. I went to grade school at a Catholic school. High school was a Catholic high school, and then college was Catholic also. So I had the Notre Dame nuns, the Christian Brothers in high school, and the Jesuits for college.
So any visits there? Did you make friends with the nuns at times, or how were you as a student?
Mischievous is one way of putting it, but the nuns were pretty tough nuns. I like to say I still have some scars on my hand from the rulers of getting cracked on the hands from doing stuff bad. But it was nothing wasn't corporal punishment or anything like that. But they were tough nuns, and the brothers were tough in high school also. But I would say I was probably a low A, high D student. So I wasn't one of those brainy kids that just naturally, they were just extremely intelligent.
What'd your dad do for a living?
My dad was a letter carrier. He worked for the United States Postal Service, and part-time, he also worked for the St. Louis Cardinals, which is an interesting scenario because he would take me a lot of times to the old Busch Stadium in downtown St. Louis when he was working. And he worked in the ticket office, and I would just run the stadium as a little kid. I was in the stadium when it wasn't open to the general public. It might not even be a game day, and I would just run the stadium. That was my playground, and I didn't realize how cool it was, or how neat of a thing that was until much later on in my years that I was able to play in that stadium and have it all to myself. So of course I couldn't run around the field, but I still had to play the stadium.
So here you are, a young lad, Catholic schools. What was your first job? What did you do as your first employment? I'm sure you had to have a paper route or something.
So actually, it's I worked so naturally since my dad worked at the stadium. He helped me get into what they call being an usher, where you work at the stadium helping seat people and stuff like that. And so that kind of led into other jobs. And this is while I'm in high school. So I was also working at where the St. Louis Blues hockey team played. I also worked as an usher there. And then the other thing, the service that I worked for, the usher service I worked for, also ran the trains up and down the Arch Legs. And so that was my job also, was I would work down there, especially on weekends and during the summer months. That was my job, was to run those trains up and down the Arch Legs. And that was a cool job in itself too. So
Well, yeah, if you really think about it, that's some pretty cool jobs, just in exposure and things that you get to see and people you get to visit with. So
yes.
where so how does a guy like you then end up, what made you want to join the fire service?
So there's always been a passion there, Mike. And growing up in South St. Louis, there was a fire station that was maybe 5 blocks from my house. It was the Engine House 14, and Hook and Ladder 14 was out of there. And you could actually hear the sirens on the station go off at my house when they caught a run. And I can vividly remember many times just running up to the corner because we lived in the middle of the block, and I would run up to the corner so I could see them go by. And so that was my excitement as far as my first introduction to the fire service. I thought, what an awesome thing that is, that these are people that are responding on calls to go help someone else. And my mother was, I didn't realize how much later on in life, but my mother was instrumental in who I am today, and that is about being kind and serving to others. And as a result of that, here you are, you have these individuals that are on a truck risking their lives, and they're going to save others. And so that became part of my background on why I love the fire service and what I love what we do. And so I can remember also vividly, my mom would take me to the fire station sometimes, and how the firefighters treated me and how good they treated me. And I can distinctly remember them putting me up on the tiller truck and setting up in that tiller up there, that open tiller, behind the wheel, and on the Hook and Ladder 14, and putting me in the boots and all the other things that they did, and that became formative years for where I'm at today. Is that a love for a profession that many of us enjoy, and an admiration for those that work in our profession.
Funny how our moms can put some of that service to others in our psyche, huh?
It is. I'll just briefly share with you. We lived again in this, brick structure that every other house on the street was the same way. It was 3 stories of bricks. That's how those homes in St. Louis are built. And there was an alley behind our house, and there was houses across the street that were the same way. But twice a week, there would be trash men, as I called them. They would come down the alley and they would pick up the trash. And it was not like today where you had a truck that had an arm and it would pick up a container and lift it up and dump it. These were men that physically worked hard. They would actually walk down the alley, a crew of 3. One would drive the truck, but one would walk on either side of the alley and lift up cans that you would put your trash in. They would lift it up and carry it to the back of the truck and dump it, and then put the can back down, the empty can. It was smelly. It was hard work. During the summer months, it was hot. It was humid. During the winter months, it was cold. They probably weren't paid very well because they were city workers. But what she did twice a week when she heard them coming is she would go out with water or coffee or sandwiches, and or both, and give these men something, to eat and drink. And she did it with a servant's heart, as I like to say. And so I didn't realize, Mike, until much later, that formed a lot, or I'm at today, on how I lead. And that is that we should be servants to others. that it's not them serving us as leaders, but it's about us serving them and making sure that they have everything they need to do their job, the tools, the education, the resources, and the support they should have from us as leaders in order to be successful in their jobs. And that's what she was doing. She was, with her heart, she would go and support them with food and water and do what she could, help them be more successful as much as you would look at it in a different way. But I look at it that way. So that was my mom, and the impact that she had on me as far as what I see today as far as leadership goes.
Gosh, isn't it something just as simple as, your mom probably didn't even realize what that impact was. It was doing that right thing and taking care of others. Wow. So,
Never had an unkind word for anybody, Mike. She never said anything unkind about anybody, and which is always good to everyone. And that you know, farm, I believe, who I am today, and that is how we should be with others, especially in leadership positions.
a lot of us in the fire business went through this whole testing process. You get your first full-time job. How did that play out for you? What was the environment back when you started? Did you find yourself hey man, St. Louis is where I'm going, and you and 1,000 of your friends took a test, or how was it when you started?
So even before that, so when I got old enough, what's cool is that they ask you, what do you want for Christmas? What do you want for your birthday? And I wanted a radio that I could tune in and listen to the fire calls. So here I am in seventh or eighth grade, and right then already, Mike, I'm listening to fire calls and tuning into the police radio. And it wasn't a scanner; it was actually a dial radio. You're such a young man that you probably don't remember or even know about those types of things, but it was just like if you had an FM, AM, dial where you tune it, and you had
Yeah.
to tune it also to the right frequency on this. It was a Radio Shack radio, and you had to tune it to the right frequency in order to listen to the fire calls. And so I would listen to those fire calls all the way from, I think it was seventh or eighth grade, all the way through high school. And I think I knew the city better than anybody because when call me a nerd, but when a call would come out, I get out a city map and I look and see where that address was and stuff like that. So, and where the engine companies were at. So there was a love already developing back then. And so I go through high school, and so I had an opportunity to apply for actually a federal job. I was 2 months out of high school. They had an opening. They had these federal jobs where they train you either, they train you to work on as a firefighter or work on the ambulance. And so I applied and got accepted. So 2 months out of high school, I find myself in an academy class where they're training us to be firefighters and how to work on an ambulance. Now, then they would put you as part of the federal program that either put you on the ambulance or they put you on the fire truck. And what was interesting, I'll tell you even a little bit of a war story back then, is I didn't even have a license. I didn't have an EMT license. I didn't have nothing. And here they are putting me on an ambulance as an attendant and taking care of patients. And all I really
Wow.
truly had was some type of training out of the academy on how to control bleeding and this is the shocking part, how to take a pen apart and stick it in someone's throat if they were choking. So
Wow.
I'll never forget the first call where I got put on an ambulance and got sent to some high-rise projects in St. Louis on the near north side, federal housing projects. And we walk up the fifth floor, sixth floor, somewhere. I think it was fifth or sixth floor for a lady that's delivering a baby. And the guys are telling me you don't take the elevators in these buildings. And so we had to walk up these flights of stairs, these concrete flights of stairs up to this fifth or sixth floor. I can't remember if it was fifth or sixth floor. And the smell of urine in the steps, and it's the middle of the summer because it's 2 months after high school, so it's July, and she's about to deliver a baby, and we bring her down and put her in the ambulance, and I'm in the back. I have no idea what I'm doing. I think I'm more scared than she is, and I'm begging the guy up front to turn on the lights and the sirens so we can get to the hospital. And he kept telling me, "You're fine, you're fine, you're fine." Well, she never did deliver in the back, but we did get to the hospital. And then, so about 8, 9, 10 months into my employment, all of a sudden there's this push that they're going to put a bunch of us through EMT school, this rapid class. And so they put 32 of us through this EMT school, and only 7 of us passed. 25 people failed. So
Wow.
so that I guess where I'm going with this story is I'm 18 years old and I'm finding myself working on fire trucks and working on ambulances, and so that became my you know start of a career in St. Louis. And then 25 years later, I retired as the chief paramedic. I was honored to retire as the chief paramedic from St. Louis. So
How was ALS service? Was the city providing ALS or advanced life support as we know it then?
So, out of all the ambulances that were in the city at that time, back in 1977, I'm talking about, there was only 2 ambulances in the city that had advanced life support, and they were these they call them LSVs, life support vehicles, and
Yeah.
and they were the only ones. Everything else was BLS, and there wasn't a whole lot of paramedics running around then, and so you couldn't make ALS vehicles without paramedics, and so eventually, about 1977, 1980, I decided to go to paramedic school with some of my friends, and that's when I went to paramedic school. Was in 1980.
I'm amazed. I think obviously the U.S. Fire Services challenge right now and finding more paramedics, and right, we're following national registry, and I am beyond impressed what I see our modern day paramedics doing. Right, I played paramedic in the '90s, and it was IVO2, maybe a 4-lead rapid transport, some nitro, Mona protocol, that type of stuff. And right, you look at this transition from that '80s paramedic, probably the late '90s paramedic, into what these kids, what our paramedics are doing today. It's incredible in really a short time frame what the transition has been in emergency medicine.
So, Mike, as you know, I write books, and so I'm actually writing a new book. And one of the things that I'm talking about is in one of the sections is all the changes that I have seen, from my time as being a paramedic. And as we speak, I'm pulling that up, and so I actually was shocked at the number of changes that I have seen from the time that I have become a paramedic to where we're at today on the changes that have occurred. And it's there's no other way to describe it. I'm going to look at this real fast, and I'm trying to think I'm trying to do a search here that I can find the words. So during my 42 years as a paramedic, I've seen us move from 3-lead EKGs to 12-lead, saline locks, mechanical CPR compression devices. We now have CPAP, measurement of pulse oximetry, the wearing of gloves. We didn't wear gloves back then, Mike. It was in the mid '80s we started wearing gloves because there was this thing running around that we were scared of called AIDS, that all of a sudden that people were dying from. We started, obviously, we used to write patient care reports on paper. Now we use computer tablets. We can now Bluetooth all our data from our monitor defibrillators into our computer tablets. We wear body armor. We never used to wear body armor. We now have hands-free defibrillation. We used to actually hold paddles in our hands. We have these stretcher loading systems. We used to have the 2-man stretchers, we called them, where you had to actually bend down and on the count of 3 lift together with your legs and put the stretcher in the back of the ambulance. And then we went to the 1.5-man stretchers, and now we have these stretcher loading systems. We have all kinds of new adjunct airways other than intubation. We have the eye gels, the King Airways. We have now entitled CO2, which we never had in the past when I started. We have rapid sequence intubation, interosseous infusions. We can do cardiac pacing. We can do cardioversion. Some paramedics are actually using ultrasounds out in the field. We've also been trained to use ventilators. We now have some services have these fancy video laryngoscopes, computer laryngoscopes, and then just all the new drugs. And those are all the changes and plus more that I've seen in my 42 plus year career. And you probably have seen some since you've been a paramedic since the 90s.
Wow, that's a great list because we were just talking the other day. We actually had one of our paramedic services, their stretcher broke at the bottom, And these new stretchers, they're just ungodly heavy, but they're a different design than what those 2-person lifts were. And I was trying to explain to some of our newest staff how you would have to squat down, and if the person on the stretcher exceeded what 2 people could lift, it would be even harder to add a third at the foot or 4 people between the doors. And they just couldn't comprehend how we sat and lifted. They're like, "Didn't you break your back every time?" I'm like, there was a lot of that going on for sure.
Well, there's a lot of people in our profession, as you know, that their backs are no longer any good
Yeah.
because of those types of systems. And so I actually like to think about the future too, Mike. And I
Mm.
predict one day that just like in the movie Back to the Future, where he was riding on a hoverboard, that our backboards will be hoverboards in the future, and even maybe our stretchers will be hoverboards, and so we'll just be able to hover them and just float them into the back of the ambulance, or on a hoverboard on a backboard, and just hover them onto the stretcher without bending down to lift up that backboard anymore. So I
Yeah.
think we're going to see some cool things in the future too. So
People heard it here first, right? Now, Stryker's going to get that to happen, Gary, and I'm going to make sure you get some commission off of that idea.
that'd be nice, Mike, and I'll share it with you. So
We need that. We need that ancillary income sometimes. So,
Mike, I
chief
think
paramedic, and then where do
I
you
just
go
want to tell
after
you,
this? Oh yeah,
could I just tell you one more future I predict?
yeah.
I also suspect that the paramedics, firefighters that are born today, the firefighter paramedics that are born today on December, the 10th of 2021, will never drive a fire truck or an ambulance. Because when they become firefighter paramedics in 21, 22, 25 years, it'll be the 2040s.
Yeah.
And we will have autonomous driving. And
Hmm.
you will sit in the front cab, if there is a cab, maybe it's just one large compartment, and you'll be looking at computer monitors and looking at pre-plans and researching information before you get to the scene. And the vehicle will automatically drive itself there. And you may actually have a drone that goes up ahead of you to the scene and is sending video images back to the scene and transmitting what's going on, if it's a fire or if it's a car accident or whatever the case might be. And so the kids that are born today, this day, that are our future firefighter paramedics are going to see some amazing things that we don't even think about at this point.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, and that may be a godsend even for us, just in allowing us to distribute workforce differences, right? You think about how many times we have to add a driver, add part of a fire crew, because you just need more hands in the back. And if that fire truck or that ambulance can get us there safely without that driver, incredible, incredible.
Yes.
All right. So you leave or you retire out of the city. Where's the next stop?
So I took a job as the director, kind of like a public safety director, down in Jefferson County, Missouri, which is
Oh,
south of St. Louis. And I'm down there. And as when the commissioners, there's 3 county commissioners, when they offered me the job, they said, there's another area we like you to address because we got nobody to oversee it. Because I'm supposed to have fire and EMS and hazmat and emergency management. And they said, we want you to have another area that we got nobody to oversee. And I said, what's that? And they said, animal control. I said, animal control. And I said, I don't know nothing about animal control. They said, oh, that's right. We got supervisors there to manage it, all that. We just need somebody to oversee it. So I said, okay, well, I'm here to serve, so I'll take it. My 90% or more of my time was spent dealing with animal control issues. It was just mind-boggling because it's a rural county of 680 square miles, and I got bears running around, I got wolves, I got
oh my,
people from the city are coming and dropping their dogs out there because they don't want to euthanize them. They just let them out on the side of the road. Cats, we got dead horses in ponds. And that's all I dealt with. And so I thought this, as there's a recent article that's been popular. This is not what I signed up for. Has been circulating. This is not what I signed up for. Um, and so then an offer comes from Memphis. The fire chief down there asked me if I'd be interested in coming to work in Memphis. They had a lot of challenges with their EMS system. They basically had dismantled over the years and decimated their EMS system. There was no more management of the EMS system at all. They basically divvied up whatever ambulances were in what battalions, that's who was managing that ambulance, was that battalion chief. Nobody was overseeing the EMS system. And so, anyway, his name was Richard Arwood, a man that I greatly admire. And didn't really know him up to that point, but I have the most profound respect for him right now. And we talked and talked. He had created a new position of deputy fire chief on his command staff, and he wanted to fill that position. And so, as a result, and I'm ahead of your questions, but I only spent about 8 or 9, 10 months with Jefferson County there, and then went to work for Memphis.
And Memphis is, I mean, it's a grown-up city with lots of challenges. It's got a little bit of everything.
Oh yeah, it's you don't think of, and I never really thought of Memphis as a quote unquote big city. And I never realized why until I finally figured it out. And that is because they don't have a major league team to speak of. It seems like if you have a major league team, you are
Yeah.
considered a big city, a Detroit, a Chicago, a St. Louis, a Los Angeles, a Cincinnati. Memphis doesn't have a professional baseball team. They don't have a professional football team. They don't have a hockey team. They do have a basketball team, but I never really comprehended the size of Memphis until I went to work there. And it's huge. I think it's the 18th most populous city in the country, and I think about 800,000 people or something like that. A large fire department, about 1,800 firefighters. It has 58 stations. At the time when I went there, it had 28 truck companies. I think they're down to 21 truck companies after some cuts now. So it's a substantially large fire department. And so what was cool about going to work in Memphis, besides working with all the outstanding people that I worked with, was the fact that I got 25 years working in a major city like I did with St. Louis. And now here I find myself back working in a major city again, a place where I love working in a big city. And here I am finding myself back in the same scenario with a great opportunity to rebuild an EMS system.
All right. So this for, I think some people can be I think some people are naturally built to go into somebody else's system and make friends. And Gary Ludwig doesn't go into many rooms and not make a friend, right? That's just how I know how you are. And so how do you, right? I think some people really struggle with this, right? An outside leader comes into an organization. Maybe the organization's great. Typically, it's not great if there's an outsider coming in. Right here, you are a new position. I could probably hear some of the kitchen table talk. Who's this guy? So how do you break that down? What from a leadership perspective, Gary? How did you tackle this thing?
So you're absolutely right, Mike. I have seen many. There are a lot of chief officers on the body pile of going into another city and thinking that they're going to make changes and that it's going to be accepted. And they're on the heat pile with all the other bodies. And so I actually have watched what others have done and where they failed at and why they failed. And one of the reasons they have failed is they tried to change culture. They tried to go in and say, I know more than you, and I'm going to change your culture. And so I went in with a different attitude, and my attitude was, I'm here to listen to you because you know better than me what needs to be changed. I'm just here to help affect that change. And then, Mike, I recommend this for anybody as far as leadership goes. If you go into another system and you're an outsider coming in from the outside, number one, you don't want to change culture, but you want to look for something that is grossly wrong, something that needs to be fixed right away, as I like to say, low-hanging fruit, that everybody, almost consensus-wise, 100% of the people will say, yes, that's exactly what needed to happen. He did the right thing. This guy's going to be good. And so I was looking for the low-hanging fruit in Memphis, something I could immediately fix right away that was wrong, that everybody would say, yes, this is the guy that's going to be good. He's going to fix things. And I found it. It was, if you can let me talk I have a tendency to talk too much. So, but if you let me tell the story. So they had this crazy system where they had what they call QI farms in Memphis that all their QI people in EMS, that's all they did was review trip sheets, not for medical competency or efficacy or whether there were problem areas they could fix, but if you were filling out if you were filling out this paper document correctly, and if you missed a box, they would show up at your station the next day with that trip sheet, and you had to sign a disciplinary form or a QI form that you had missed that box. Now, you might have been on your 16th run of the day, which was not uncommon in Memphis on a 24-hour shift. And at 2:00 in the morning, you missed one box on that checkoff sheet, on that patient care report. They were at your station the next day disciplining you. And the medics hated it. They hated it. They absolutely hated it. And it was terrible. And I asked the battalion chief who was over the QI area, what do you do with these farms? He said, we put them in a drawer. I said, and do you ever go back and pull them back out? Are you still there, Mike? There you are.
It looked like you're frozen, and I just paused for a second. I still see you. It just looked like you were frozen, so I was just making sure.
Were you able to hear the whole story up to that point?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I got you. Yeah. You're
so
good.
They're completing these disciplinary. And so I asked the guy, who's over this battalion chief, who's over the QI people. I said, what do you do with these farms? We put them in the drawer. And I said, what do you do with them then? Nothing. So you put these farms in a drawer and you're pissing all these paramedics off who might have been on their 16th run of the day and they missed one box and they're getting disciplined. So within the first month, Mike, I eliminated the farm. I got rid of that farm. I said, I put out a department-wide memo that the QI farm is gone. And it was almost to 100% of the people, the paramedic firefighters, were elated that this thing was done. Even the QI people who had to go out to the stations and discipline people. And QI shouldn't be about disciplining, but they were excited. And so it was done. So I looked for the low-hanging fruit. I'm going to get back to what I said originally. I looked for the low-hanging fruit that I'm the new guy coming in, that I could make one change that would be positive, that everybody would say, yes, this is the right guy to start changing things. And that's what I found. And from there, it gave me a foundation to start making the other changes that I needed to make in the system, then rebuild that system. And I did it through empowering people, by giving people say-so in issues, listening truly to what they had to say, and giving ownership to people to make those changes. And so 10 years later, I like to think we built a pretty good system in Memphis that won a lot of different awards. And so get back to your original question. You got to come in not making changes, not changing culture, looking for the low-hanging fruit and making that immediate change that everybody, almost to a person, is going to agree that you're the right person because you just made the first decision that was good.
Part of that credibility you need, right? Because somewhere you're going to tap into something else, right? You're going to have to tackle something way tougher than that, right?
Exactly. And you're building a foundation that you're making the right decisions. And if you have to make that tough decision later on and affect change in a way that some people may not agree with, at least you have some foundation for making that change, that you've already established yourself as one who makes good and accurate decisions.
So how many years in Memphis?
I spent 10 years in the Memphis Fire Department. So
Okay.
35 years between two major cities.
And from there, is that when you went over to Champaign?
Yep. Applied to Champaign and actually applied in two different places at the same time. I was St. Charles, Missouri. I was looking for the right spot. St. Charles, Missouri, which is just north of St. Louis, and Champaign here. I was a finalist down to the Final Four in both. There was 84 people that applied for this job here in Champaign. And Champaign was about 2 weeks ahead of the process of St. Charles. And the offer came from Champaign. Then I found out later that St. Charles is going to make an offer too. So I've been here now 7 years in Champaign as the fire chief, and I work with just some awesome and phenomenal firefighters and staff.
Yeah, you have some great people within that organization. You can see it all the time. Just some of the great stuff going on. there. What do you think is the biggest that you're facing right now in Champaign?
So, God, that's a good question because I would always like to have more staffing and more money in my budget, but it's up to me to make it work. And so, I guess our biggest challenge, gosh, is keeping our guys focused. This COVID thing is just draining people, and I've had a spike here recently that I've had 7 firefighters test positive in the last 23 days, and so it has been such a distraction to my firefighters when it comes to training and all the other things that we do. But I got to tell you, they're very resilient and they're outstanding, and they have weathered it. But it's tough. It's tough on them. It's tough on me. It's tough watching them have to quarantine and stay at home and worry about their families. And so I worry about my guys continually, and that's what I'm worried about now. So that's my biggest challenge right now is helping them through this process of COVID and the spike that we're experiencing, and just trying to keep them focused.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing how much our staff is dealing just with some complex stuff. I keep saying that if you're chief long enough, you're going to find out a lot of things that are going on in your staff's lives. To me, it seems that COVID's just making it more, right? There's whether it's bringing its right death in their family that has nothing to do with COVID, but we have this COVID thing and all these other items just kind of keep popping up on our staff. And, you want to go around and just hug all your staff, these big, tough men and women, staff, right? They're type A personalities. And, deep down inside as chief that some of them are really hurting and they're struggling. And
Yes.
I think as leaders, right, this is where we either shined or we didn't shine. And I think you're one of them that understands how important it is, our job, right? We still got to fight fires. We still got to go on EMS calls. We still got to cut people out of cars. But our people are up to their eyeballs in stuff.
I know it is.
Yeah.
And it just, I've had people here that have lost family members. And then the other thing that happened during this COVID thing was we had one of our firefighters got killed in a car crash off duty. I had another firefighter who died from cancer. And so in the middle of all this, we're trying to maintain, their sense of reason with the COVID, and then they're losing their, two of their brothers. And so it's just, and then we had a police officer shot and killed here in May that, many of our firefighters knew because they work on the streets with that officer. Another officer got shot twice, 3 times actually in that shooting. So,
Wow.
so it's just, it just seems like when you think nothing else can happen, something else piles on, Mike. And so, but I got to tell you, my men and women are very resilient, and I just give all credit to them for how they've sustained through this.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, so Gary, I know you've hired some people, and how do you prep what's your key? I mean, right, you get a brand new firefighter that's right. They're super excited to raise that hand in front of you, get sworn in. We know we've got these pressures. It's a tough job. What do you say to these new firefighters?
It's funny you asked me that, Mike, because I actually have a bullet list. I have in my computer. I have when I first meet with them for the first time, they listen to a speech from me, and they sit in the conference room and with all my other officers, and I give them a speech. And of course, we go through all. That's not the only thing we're in there for. I want to learn about them, and my officers introduce themselves to the firefighters, and we talk. But then at the end of it, I go through a list of expectations and things that I want to impart on them. And there's actually a whole list that I have, and it takes me about a half hour to 45 minutes to get through that. But I talk about things that they've hit the lottery, and they've hit the jackpot. That the fact that they're sitting here where many wish they were. If you were to add up their salaries over the course of their career, and then at the end of it, we're going to say thank you and here's a pension. You might as well take a ticket out and cash in those 6 numbers, because it's like getting an annuity payment is what it's like. And so, and then not only are you getting this excellent pay and benefits, but you have an opportunity every day to make a difference in the lives of others. And yeah, there's going to be calls that you're going to question yourself and what am I doing here? And this is not what I signed up for, type of thing. But at the same time, there are going to be that little old lady that's laying on the linoleum. To her, you are her hero. That she's going to call you one on what may be the worst day of her entire life. And you might not see it, but I tell them that you are a hero to them that day and you have made a difference in their lives. And not everybody gets to say that when they come home from work or when they get in their car and leave work, that they've made a difference in the lives of others. And you get to do that. And so there's a whole list of things I go through, Mike, and that's just one of them. And I want them to also feel as excited as they are today when they all of a sudden that starts creeping in, and you're having a bad day. I want you to think back and harken back to this day of how excited you are to be sitting here, and do not forget that feeling that you feel right now. And I want you to think about that 10 years from now when you're having maybe a bad day, and think about how blessed and lucky you are. I'll never forget walking into a fire station, and I won't name the city. It's not where I worked at, any of the three cities I worked at. And I was there to visit a friend, and there's a firefighter washing his new F-150 pickup truck. And while I'm talking to this other firefighter I know in the Bay, this guy's over there bitching to somebody else. And finally, I had to walk over and go, "What are you bitching about?" I said, "You got a new F-150 pickup truck, so obviously you're paid well enough. You're getting paid to wash your truck. You're using their water, their soap, their brush, their vacuum cleaner, their towels to dry it off. And what are you complaining about?" And he's complaining because he was supposed to be at another station today, but somebody called in sick, and so he got sent over to this other station. I go, "You're still blessed. You're still
Mm.
blessed. There are many people laying in hospital beds today that would switch places with you in a heartbeat." So that's what I tell my new firefighters, is that you're blessed. You're blessed to be here. And I feel all of us should feel that way, Mike. I'm sorry for rambling on.
No, I think it has been so easy to be negative in our business right now, right? I don't know how your call volume is, but it's up here 20%. Our staff's busier than ever. And, so many times I think it is hard to get that negative. And I love seeing online all these pictures of graduating academy classes, new hires getting their arm raised. And I always, when I see those, that's what I want to reflect back to, right? I remember walking in and getting turnout gear. I remember the smell of the turnout gear room, right?
Mhm.
That first time getting it. And I joke, right? I want that new car smell in the fire service that smells like a fire academy smell, that
Yeah.
reminds us all about how blessed we are. Because you're right, we would do anything for that job. And um, I think we see that passion in so many of our firefighters, but we can also see in so many of our firehouses where that tide is turning, and we've just forgotten that reason.
I tell guys all the time to stay away from the BMWs. You know who the BMWs are?
No.
The bitchers, moaners, and whiners. All right. And, unfortunately, we have some people in our profession like that. And they forget how blessed they are. And so, um, and unfortunately, they can become infectious. If you
Mm.
listen to somebody bitch and moan and whine long enough, next thing you know, you see yourself as a victim also. And you
Yeah.
start bitching, moaning, and whining, and your attitude turns negative, and you're just a miserable person. And there's no reason to be miserable in this profession.
No.
Not everything's ideal. There's no organization, there's no fire department. And there's problems at IBM, at Dell Computer. If you go to American Airlines, nothing is ever perfect. No organization is absolutely perfect. Apple Computer, we can go through the list of them. Nothing is ever perfect. But at the same time, just realize how blessed you are, and that we live in these wonderful times. I went back and looked at my ancestry. My great grandfather on my father's side had 13 children. Only six lived to be two adults. On my mother's side, my great grandfather had 12 children. Only two lived to be adults. 10 died, in childhood. You know, And then you look at all the things that we have today. You know, you can just walk in and pick up whatever food you want at the grocery store, or turn on your TV and be entertained. Or, you know, back then they're traveling by horse and wagon, had to go find their food, and they had to go pick wood in order to get some heat in the house. And they had no medicine, and kids died young, and, you know, parents buried their kids, and just the list of stuff goes on and on. And, you know, we're just living in the best of times. And I know things are not always perfect, but we're still blessed in so many different ways. And if you're in the fire service, you're getting a paycheck, you're even blessed more than others.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell people, if you're watching this and you've made it here 40 minutes with Gary and I, this Gary's position on this does not waver. Like, this continues on. I'm sure that there are some days where maybe his staff might slightly disagree, but his heart, his passion, it carries. And so, Gary, like, we at the international, right? Who would have ever thought at the IFC that you'd be the guy who had to have discussions about canceling conferences and how do we keep an association alive? And I think, there was a lot of hard discussions that had to take place. In the IFC is not the only one. This happened all across. So take that leadership that you kind of displayed in your career, your life, and when we start to look at the IFC, because not only are we running an association, but you are the nation's fire chief in many ways. So how do you think that all translates? How does this all tie together? That demeanor that you kind of carry, and even over into the IFC.
So you might have heard me say this before. When I come in here in the morning, people ask me, how you doing? And I say, today's another day of opportunities. So, and you might have heard me say that in the past, Mike.
A couple times, yeah.
And yeah, there are problems and there are challenges, but I like to say they're not problems or challenges, they're opportunities. And so we should always look for the opportunity. And yes, not I, but you being a member of the board with myself, we had many challenges throughout that COVID, and we saw the opportunities. It started before the COVID. As you know, we had financial challenges within the association, and then we're trying to work our way through all the financial challenges and some of the other things that popped up, and then COVID hit, and then things even went further downhill. And so navigating through that is not only seeing it as woe is me, but it's saying, no, gentlemen and ladies, let's look at what are the opportunities. And that's why I tried to focus as president at the time, was not only help us through as an association to navigate it, but also look for the opportunities, while we were also demonstrating leadership at the national level. Mike, I have always been critical of how our association reacts when a major event occurs. We should be our nation's leader and spokes out front. Our association should be generating what is I'm trying to think of the right word, but what is the thinking when something happens, whether it's the wildfires out west or when the Notre Dame Cathedral burned in Paris or whatever. The IAFC should be out front leading and setting the agenda. That's the word I was looking for, the agenda for addressing that. And we've been silent sometimes. And it always bothered me. And when the pandemic hit, I was determined that our association was going to be out front leading and setting the agenda for what was occurring in the fire service, and making sure that our association was representing our members and doing the best that we could for the entire fire service.
And I can tell you, it still comes up, Gary, some of those things, right? The task force, the webinars, experts advocating for and getting personal protective equipment for our staff. I mean, it came up yesterday at a meeting that I went, that somebody asked, hey, I think it's time we get another update, because where I'm at, we're spiking. We're at our highest numbers. And so, right, I think you set that standard very high, in the fire service greatly benefited. I mean, you look at how we took technology, the GIS, we were tracking where people were getting sick and how, I mean, it was incredible, the work that happened. And that's that opportunity, right? I mean, yeah.
You're absolutely right. I give a lot of credit to our staff. What a phenomenal job they did. We had an operations center. People didn't know the IAFC had an operations center running up there at our offices in Chantilly, Virginia, where we were tracking an immense amount of data, looking at infection rates and looking at positivity rates, looking at quarantining of firefighters, where there were supply chain issues. I'm trying to think of all the different things and metrics that we were tracking. And then all the other national organizations started dumping data into our system also. And Mike, we actually, I think we did 18 different webinars. We had 2 different task forces running. We had our COVID-19 task force, which had a whole host of different experts on it. We had our economic task force. I know we put out over 55 different email blasts to our members about information. We had an active website that was changing, almost on an hourly basis with information. I can go through the list of, of all the individuals we were talking to at the White House, the Capitol, and all the different, we were talking to at least 6 different appropriations committees in the Senate and the House, FEMA representatives, DHS, HHS. I can go through the list of them. I testified 3 different times on to the Committee on Immunization Practices at the CDC, advocating for firefighters and EMS personnel become prioritized on vaccines. The list of things goes on, but we were determined, and I have to give credit to the staff, they are the ones that made the IFC really shine during all this.
I think yeah, staff was incredible, and because in your leadership was just it made a difference. And so I don't want to overlook, and I stated it when we started, your number one initiative outside of COVID was what, Gary?
If you don't feel well, don't make it your farewell. And thank you for segueing into that, Mike, because the number one killer of firefighters is cardiac deaths. 43% every year, about approximately 43% of all firefighter deaths every year are cardiac events. And all of them, to a person, almost say, I don't feel well, I don't feel right, something's wrong. And we ignore them. We tell them to go lay down in the bunk hall, or we tell them to go home and rest. And there's been many a firefighter that have gone home, they don't hear from them anymore. They check on them, they're dead. Or they found them dead in the bunk hall, or we ignore the person themselves ignores the symptoms. And I've had people tell me, and I'm going to tell you, it's been myself. I've been in that category also. That there's a feeling that you have never felt before. And I have a stent in my heart. I was in 2015. I was training with my guys. We're doing some live fire training. Put on my gear, put on my tank, put on my. We had this. It looks like a taxpayer. There's a bunch of row of buildings. We weren't burning in it, but we were smoking. We have a ability to smoke it up real good. You can burn from the outside and pump the smoke inside. And we're practicing using the ticks. So I bunked up, went on the first floor, playing around on the first floor, and the guys are using some ticks. They're looking for some victims. And so I'm going to go up on the second floor and check out what's going on up there. And I walk up one flight of stairs, get to a landing, go to the second flight of stairs, and I get inside the door. And Mike, I had zero energy. I felt that my legs were just going to wobble out. And I just said, man, I'm too old for this. That was my quote with an expletive in there. And I came back down and told the operations chief, who was standing outside, I said, I'm too old for this shit, is what I actually said. And I could barely make it to my car, got my gear off, and it took me about a day to recover. And a week later, I found myself in the cath lab. And there are a lot of firefighters that also describe that before they died, or before they got a stent or something else. And so I'm here to preach that if you don't feel well, don't make it your farewell. It'll be a feeling that you have never felt before. Something that tells you there's something wrong with your body. Don't ignore it. And as a result of that one little stent, I'm good to go. And so, and that was what my program was going to be about. We actually had a kickoff meeting. I have to thank AMR. They donated to that to make that work. Also, Pulse Point did that also. They gave me money to make that program work and fund that program. We actually put some videos together. We got a website together. We were putting out information. And we actually were launching in February of 2019. And then, COVID hit in March of 2019. So it kind of died off. Now, Safety, Health, and Survival section has taken that back on again. There's the deputy chief out of Ohio, Ian Emmons, that is actually running that. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, it's such a interesting. Who made you go to the hospital, Gary?
I actually said, let me go talk to my cardiologist because there's something going on here. And he said, let's give you a stress test. And next thing I know, I find myself in a cath lab. So,
wow. All right. So as we kind of wrap up, you're an author of 4 books and 1 on the way.
Yeah, I have 4 books, and I'm working. I got 1 on the way, and I got some others in the pipeline too that I have on the drawing board. So,
make a great Christmas gift for anybody who's still looking for that shopping, right? Any of those. Gary's, which one is that one? Fully Involved?
Yeah, these are my 2 most popular books, Fully Involved Leadership and also 401 Things Veteran Firefighters Can Teach You.
Okay. What, tell me, what do you think, what would be the one big concept out of Fully Involved that just comes to mind with you when you think about that book?
That you're at the bottom of the organizational chart. That there's a lot of concepts in there, but that the overarching theme is that you're at the bottom of the organizational chart. Your firefighters are not here to serve you. You're here to serve them. And that is that you are there to make sure they have all the tools and the education, the resources, the support, whatever it takes to get them, and allow them to do their job. If I'm going to ask firefighters to go into a building and risk their lives, the least I can do is do what I can to fight to support them to do that job. And so that's the overarching theme that comes out of that book in so many different ways.
Yeah, there are some good reads. I have not made it all the way through Fully Involved yet, but I have on 2 out of the 3, and I always enjoy them. So, Gary, as we kind of wrap up, people, if they don't know, you're very active on Twitter, Facebook, always pushing out great content, latest news. Gary is in the mix. He knows what's going on. So what's your advice? Let's go this way, because I think you just gave great advice to incoming fire chiefs, right? That service above self, that service to your crews, flip the script type things. How about as the man or the woman? What's your advice to them in their life? How do you handle, right? Some people might think being a fire chief is a little bit stressful. So how do we give advice outside of, hey, how we take care of our staff and take care of our organization? What's your advice for them taking care of themselves?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. So you have to have life balance. And so I like to think I have life balance with family. I'm blessed to have a nice home on a lake. And so as a result of that, I do a lot of boating, and I like looking and sitting at the lake and doing all those sort of things. And so those are things that I think are important, is that you have to have life balance.
Okay. All right. What's next for you, Gary? We got a book coming out. When do you think that book's going to be out?
I'm going to have to work hard here to get it done. I think I got all of it laid out. I just got to finalize it. So I'm maybe within the next couple months, maybe.
Wonderful. And anything last that you want to share with the group?
Nothing. Just an honor it is to serve with you, Mike. And I know you're a candidate for second vice president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. And how exciting it will be for me to see you raise your hand and take that oath. I know you'll do a phenomenal job.
Well, thanks, Gary. I do appreciate the support. It's just been an honor to spend this last hour with you. You are cream of the crop, and I can't say thank you enough for all that you've done for us in this business. So thanks, everybody. Tune in next time. Make sure you hit the like button. And thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Mike.